de la mañana a tenerla en mi alegría, darle besito a la cara, qué bonito, vida mía. Con la luz de la mañana amanece un nuevo día y el tenerla ahí en mi cama, qué bonita es la alegría. Carmen te puso por nombre, te lo puso a ti tu madre, te lo puso a ti tu madre, porque le gustó a tu padre.
Guardo una botella en la despensa, guardo sin tocar las ganas de volar. El viento cuando silbatar haré una promesa, serán noches distintas.
Si ahora saluda al vecino al pasar. Dime si ves una luz al final de ese túnel. ¿Sabes cómo se pronuncia la pena y el pan? Cuando sabe el vino a agua con sal. Cuando ves que nunca se acaba este lunes. Dime que te has acordado de guardar nuestras hazañas entre los cajones. Muchos cartones con los que montar. Fuertes y cabañas, tanques y murallas. Vuelve, que incendiaremos el mundo otra vez. Que incendiaremos el mundo otra vez. Nos volveremos a ver cuando salgamos del túnel, tumbando alguna pared para poder ver las nubes. Nos volveremos a ver cuando salgamos del túnel, tumbando alguna pared. Dime qué precio has pagado por tu libertad. Es la distancia a una cárcel, es noche y olvido. Es aburrido pensar en que no hay que pensar. Qué triste acordarse del triste final de los que cayeron durante el camino. Dime que te has acordado de guardar nuestras hazañas entre los cajones. Muchos cartones con los que montar. Fuertes y cabañas, tanques y murallas. Vuelve, que incendiaremos el mundo otra vez. Que incendiaremos el mundo otra vez. Nos volveremos a ver cuando salgamos del túnel, tumbando alguna pared para poder ver las nubes. despensa, guardo sin tocar las ganas de volar. El viento cuando silba tararea una promesa, serán noches distintas, con una luz inmensa, porque guardo una botella en la despensa. Guardo sin tocar las ganas de volar. El viento cuando silba tararea una promesa, serán noches distintas. Incendiaremos el mundo otra vez.
gusta siempre ser así. No hay alternativa. Si la hubiera no me gustaría. Mira la ciudad por la ventana de la cafetería y me dice que sonría.
Hola, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Buenas tardes y
Good
bienvenidos y
afternoon and
bienvenidas a
welcome.
este panel de
Welcome
lujo,
all to this
realmente.
luxury panel today.
Y además, permitidme hacer una
And
mención
allow me
al
to
nombre
make
de
a
la
special
sala.
mention to the name of this
Creo que
room.
estar además en la sala que lleva el
Being
nombre de
in
Ernest
the room
Lluch,
that takes the name of Ernest Lluch
que,
is something to be mentioned.
que tan importante fue
This person was
no solo para los
very
socialistas,
important, not just for the
sino
socialists,
para la igualdad,
but also
para el acceso universal a la
for
salud
equal access, universal
y
access
también
to
para la
healthcare,
paz,
and
para
also for
la,
peace.
para la paz, para el diálogo.
Peace and
Ernest Lluch
dialogue.
fue un hombre de paz
Ernest Lluch
y creo
was
que hoy
a
en
man
día,
of peace,
en el contexto justo que
and
estamos viviendo
nowadays,
en
in
este
this
momento, merece la
context, in
pena
this day and
hacer
age, it's
homenaje a
worthwhile
los
paying
hombres y las
tribute
mujeres de paz.
to the men
Y
and women
después
of
de
peace.
esto, quería
After this,
daros la bienvenida
I would like
como decía, a
to
un panel de
welcome
lujo
to welcome you
sobre
to
uno
this
de los
session, a
temas
luxury session that will be addressing one of the
tener
topics,
a un presidente,
having
a unos
a
panelistas
former
de tal
president
nivel para hablar del
and
acceso
top-level
a la acción
panelists to
global
talk
para
about access to
garantizar el
global
acceso a la
action, to
justicia
ensure
a
access
todas
to
las mujeres y
justice,
las niñas.
all women and
Es el
girls.
tema que eligió la CSV
This
este
is
año,
the topic chosen by the CSV this year.
la Comisión de la
The
Comisión
Commission
Jurídica y Social de la
for the
Mujer
Legal and Social
debatió
Condition
este
of Women.
tema
This topic
y
was discussed.
leyendo el informe del
And
secretario
after reading the
general,
report of the Secretary General,
me chirrió este agrid language de
I
states
was surprised by
may wish
this acrid
to consider.
language, may wish to consider.
Los derechos siempre
Because
son may
rights
wish to consider.
are always may wish to,
Y creo
are
que en
always
este foro,
said to be
en
may
estos
wish
dos
to
días,
consider. But in
los
this forum,
socialistas,
with these
los
2 days,
progresistas del mundo estamos
socialists and
diciendo que no,
progressists of the world
que no es
say
may wish to
no.
consider, sino que
This
el
is
mundo
not
o es
best wish to
justo,
consider. The
igualitario,
world is either
sostenible o
fair,
no será el mundo que
equitable,
queremos.
sustainable,
Y por
or
eso este
it will
panel,
not be the world that we all
en
want.
este,
And that is why
auspiciado por el
in this
PSOE, yo
panel,
recuerdo Pablo Iglesias pose la frase que
the
decía
Socialist Party, I remember
que las
Pablo
mujeres
Iglesias
necesitaban
saying
una doble
women need
emancipación
double
porque
emancipation
sufrían
because
una
they
mayor
suffered
esclavitud, lo que
greater
convertía la lucha de las mujeres
slavery,
en parte
turning the fight of women
fundamental
in fundamental part of socialism, of progressism.
Y esto está en el
And
core,
this is
¿no?
part of the core
de esta
of
sesión.
this session.
Leí una frase
I read
de
a
Zanza
quote
Lula da
from
Silva
Zanza
en
Lula
la
da
COP30
Silva
que decía
that said
que la igualdad no
that
pueden ser los asuntos de mujeres, no
equality
pueden ser un anexo de las declaraciones.
cannot be
Tienen
an
que estar
annex.
en
Equality
la
amongst
esencia
women
de las
must be an annex to a
decisiones.
declaration, must be at
Y
the
no puede
essence of
haber
our decision making, and
progreso
there
ni
can be no
democracia
progress or
sin que las
democracy
mujeres tengan
without
acceso y
women
garantizado
having
la
guaranteed
justicia.
access
Y
to
de esto
justice.
sabe nuestro primer
And
interviniente,
our first
nuestro
speaker,
presidente
our
Rodríguez Zapatero,
President
hombre de
Rodríguez
paz,
Zapatero knows a lot
un
about
hombre
this. A man of
de
peace,
defensa
a man
por la igualdad,
who
los derechos, la cooperación.
is
Un presidente
defender
que
of
hizo de
rights,
nuestro país
freedoms,
vanguardia
who
en la defensa de la paz, de
defended
la
our
igualdad,
country for
de hacer un país
peace,
decente a través
decency,
de la
making
libertad
a decent country
y
through
de la
dignity
diversidad.
and diversity.
Presidente,
President,
en este momento,
at this time,
hablando de
and
justicia para
talking
las
about
mujeres y
justice
las
for women
niñas,
and girls,
con una guerra,
Eh,
¿qué nos cuentas?
what can you tell us?
Debo agradecer la
I
invitación
must thank
a esta
the organizers for this
movilización
invitation. Thank you for
global
inviting us to
de los
this
progresistas.
global mobilization of progressists.
Yo accedí al liderazgo político del Partido
I
Socialista
access to
en
the
el
political
año
leadership of
2000,
the Socialist Party in the year
cuando empezaba el
2000,
siglo
precisely
XXI.
at the beginning of the 21st century.
Entonces he
And
estado
ever since,
en activo casi
I
siempre.
have been working
Y
actively.
debo decir que
And I must say
quizá esta
that
sea
maybe this
la cumbre
is
progresista
the progressive
internacional
international
más importante
summit
de
that
este
is the
siglo.
most important of this century
por la movilización,
because of the mobilization, because of the participation of more than 50 countries, organizations and experts, because of the
que se
leadership.
produce en el
And it
momento
comes
más oportuno,
at the right time.
donde nos vamos a decidir
At a time when we
estamos
will
jugando
all
qué
decide
siglo
and
XXI
what
queremos.
21st century we
Después de
all
estos
want.
primeros 25
After
años.
these first 25
Yo debo
years,
felicitar
I must congratulate
a los organizadores,
the
al Partido
organizers, the
Socialista,
Socialist
a
Party,
todas las fundaciones,
all the
al
foundations,
Gobierno de España. No es
the
casual
government
que
of
esta cumbre
Spain.
se
It's
celebre
not
en
by
Barcelona,
chance that this summit is held in Barcelona, Spain,
con un presidente y un
with
gobierno
a president
que
and
en
a
estos
government
momentos
that
lidera
right now is
internacionalmente
leading internationally
el coraje,
courage,
la
determination,
y los objetivos progresistas
and the
para la paz y
progressive
la igualdad
objectives for peace
entre
and
los
equality
ciudadanos de distintos
amongst the citizens of so many
países. Y debo
countries.
decir
And I must say,
¿qué nos enseñan estos 25
what do
años?
these 25 years teach us?
El siglo empezó,
The century
recordaremos, con
started,
los objetivos del
we
año
shall all
2000.
remember, with the goals of the year
Naciones
2000, the
Era
UN
esperanzador.
2000 goals. It was hopeful.
Por primera vez en la
For the very
historia,
first time in
todas
history,
las naciones del mundo,
all nations in
en
the
la
world,
institución Naciones
in
Unidas,
the institution of United
aprobaban un
Nations,
programa
approved
común
a common
contra la pobreza,
program against
para
poverty,
reducir la
to
desigualdad,
reduce inequality,
para favorecer la igualdad
and to
de género,
favor gender equality,
para llevar la
as
salud
well as to take
al conjunto
healthcare
de
to
las regiones,
all
sobre
regions,
todo las más desfavorecidas.
especially the most
Eso dio lugar luego a los objetivos de
underdeveloped.
desarrollo
This led to the
sostenible
Sustainable
del
Development
2015.
Goals of 2015.
Cuando esa expectativa era tan
When the
favorable,
expectations were so
los
favorable,
atentados de las Torres Gemelas,
the
la guerra
Twin
contra el
Towers
terrorismo,
attack, the
las
war
guerras
against
en Oriente Medio,
terror, the
luego
wars in the Middle
Ucrania,
East, followed by Ukraine,
ahora
and now
la innombrable
the
acción de Israel en
action
Gaza
of Israel in Gaza.
y ahora en Irán
And
nos
now
han
in
llevado
Iran.
a un camino,
All of these have led
a un
us
camino preocupante.
to a very concerning
Solo quiero
situation.
añadir una reflexión.
Let me add just
para
one
dejarla
thought.
ahí como objetivo
Let me just mention what I
de la
believe is the
movilización
goal
progresista,
of this
que ha de
progressive
ser
mobilization.
en este momento
Its goal
determinante,
must come at this
valiente
determined
y ante todo
moment,
unida.
determined and united.
Este es el momento histórico
This is
en
the
el que
historical
necesitamos
time
más
when we need
internacionalismo,
more
para recuperar la
internationalism
vieja palabra.
to recover the use of the
Más
old
unión de
word.
todos los
More
progresistas de
union
todos
of
los
all
continentes.
progressists in all continents.
Y sobre todo determinación
And
y
above
coraje.
all, determination and courage.
Nosotros no podemos dudar de las
We
grandes
cannot doubt
convicciones
of our
que
convictions
arrancan en la
that
ilustración,
started in the
que se expresaron en los
illustration
mejores
that were
textos
expressed in the best
declarativos,
declarative texts,
en las revoluciones
in the
democráticas,
democratic
en las
revolutions,
aspiraciones justas
in the fair
de tantos movimientos.
aspirations of so many movements.
Hay dos grandes
There are two
objetivos,
great
dos
goals,
grandes
two
anhelos,
great
dos grandes
desires,
factores de
two great
movilización
factors for
para todos los
mobilization
progresistas y si me
for
apuran,
all the
para
progressive
todo aquel
movement
que
and for
sienta que
any
la democracia
who
no es
believe
solo
that
algo de lo
democracy
que
is
él
not
tiene que
just
disfrutar,
something
sino
that
que
they
debemos
must
de
enjoy,
convocar
but something
a las generaciones futuras
that other future generations must enjoy as
paz
well. Peace
como tarea.
as a
La
task.
paz como gran
Peace
tarea. Es la
as
hora
the
de
great
la paz.
task. It is the
Y la
time for
igualdad de
peace
género
and equal
como la
opportunity, equal
palanca transformadora
gender equality
social
as
en favor de
the
la justicia
transformative
más poderosa
social
que
lever in
tiene
favor of the most
la
powerful
humanidad.
justice that humankind has.
Ojalá
I wish
podamos
wish
llegar a ese
we can
2030
reach 2030
que renovamos los
when we
objetivos
will
del
be renewing
2015
the goals of 2015,
y ojalá todos los
I wish
progresistas
all the
llevemos
members
una
of the
propuesta
progressive
común.
movement can
Primer objetivo,
provide
la
a
solución
common
pacífica de los conflictos.
resolve. Peaceful
El primer
resolution of
gran
all conflict.
objetivo para el
Peace should
siglo
be the
XXI.
first and
Segundo,
foremost goal of the 21st
era el
century.
quinto. Yo siempre dije que
And the
tenía que haber sido
second,
el
it
primero.
was the fifth, but
La
I always
igualdad
said
de
had to be the
género.
first. Gender
Como gran
equality.
segundo
Gender
objetivo.
equality
¿Por qué?
as the large
Porque donde
second
hay
goal.
paz,
Because wherever there is peace,
donde no hay guerra,
where there is no war,
hay más hospitales,
there are more hospitals,
hay más escuelas,
there are more schools,
hay más capacidad de erradicar
there is
la
more
pobreza.
capacity to eradicate poverty.
Sufro
I
y debemos
suffer,
sufrir como
and we must
progresistas
suffer as members
ver
of
que en
this
este año
progressive movement to see
2026
that in this year
estamos
2026,
viendo el gasto de
we
defensa
see defense
al nivel
expenditure
más alto de
rise
la
at the
historia.
highest level
La primera
in
potencia lo
history.
incrementa un
The first power
40%
increased it by
y la
40%.
ayuda a la cooperación al
And
desarrollo
cooperation for development
reduciéndose un
is being
25%
reduced
en
by
el mundo.
25%
La
all
ayuda
around the
contra la
world.
pobreza, contra la
Cooperation against
discriminación.
poverty, against discrimination.
Esa es nuestra responsabilidad.
This
No nos vamos
is
a quejar
our
de lo que hace la
responsibility.
derecha.
We will not complain of what the right does.
Los
No,
progresistas nunca
we,
ganamos
the
quejándonos de lo que hace
progressists,
la derecha.
never complain of what the
progresistas
right
ganamos
does.
convenciendo
We will win by
de nuestros
convincing
valores y convicciones.
what our values and convictions are.
Solamente esa convicción nos dice algo
This conviction
que nos
says
enseña
and teaches
de la
us
historia
something.
y del presente.
History and the present teach us something.
Los que menos
Those
aprecian
who
y
less
defienden la
appreciate and
democracia
defend democracy
son los que más
are
combaten la igualdad
those
de
who
género y el
combat
feminismo.
more feminism and gender equality.
Tómese nota.
Take good note of that. That is the case.
En segundo lugar, aquellos que
And
no
secondly,
combaten,
those who do not
que no
face, who
denuncian
do not combat, who do not
la muerte
denounce
de
the
civiles
death
inocentes,
of innocent civilians,
luchan, que no
those who do
pelean.
not fight
por la paz,
for peace,
tienen perdido el futuro.
have lost their future.
Tienen perdido el futuro.
Have lost their future.
Porque no hay futuro
Because
como la
there is no
historia
future,
nos demuestra,
as history
a no
shows,
ser que tengamos
unless
que ver una catástrofe y luego
there
superarla.
comes a
No hay
catastrophe and then we
futuro que
overcome it.
merezca
There
la
is
pena.
no future worthwhile
Paz,
if
si la concordia,
there is
si
no
la
peace,
cooperación entre
if there
naciones
is no
no es
peace
el
amongst
auténtico
nations,
impulso
if that is not
global.
the true
Ni las banderas,
global
ni las naciones
objective.
ni
No
las
flags,
razas
no nations, no races,
idiomas
no languages
son excusa para la guerra.
are excuse to war, for war or wars.
Esa visión universal
This universal vision
en Naciones Unidas, en la
in the
Declaración de
UN,
los Derechos,
in the Declaration of Human Rights, in the illustration, in knowledge, culture, science,
nos debe llevar
must lead us to mobilize now more than ever in our generations, the living generations,
cuando luchábamos por la
as
democracia
if when we were fighting for democracy,
o por el fin de la guerra en
or for the
Vietnam,
end of
o
the
contra
war
la
in
guerra de
Vietnam,
Irak,
or against the war
más
of Iraq,
fuerte aún.
stronger even
Ahora.
now.
Para eso estamos aquí,
That is why we're here
no
today,
para quejarnos.
not to complain.
Sí,
Well,
el
yes,
cambio más importante en
the
la
most
historia
important change in
lo han
history
protagonizado las mujeres.
has been
El cambio civilizatorio
made by women.
más importante.
The most
las
important
mujeres.
civilization
En España,
movement
las mujeres.
has been led by women in
Cambiando la
Spain,
sociedad,
changing
cambiando
society,
España,
changing Spain,
haciéndola abierta,
making it
admirada,
an open, admired
como es.
country as it is today.
Si las mujeres
And that is why,
lideran,
if women lead,
conquistaremos la
we
paz
will conquer peace,
y reduciremos
and we
la
will
guerra, la
reduce
violencia y la
war,
violencia.
violence, and strength.
Pues venga, a liderar.
So
Muchas
let's
gracias.
lead. Thank you.
Gracias, presidente.
Thank you, President.
Ganaremos convenciendo,
We will win by
determinación y
convincing
coraje.
with determination and
Igualdad.
courage,
Mensajes
peace and equality,
clarísimos.
clear
Ministra Ana
messages.
Redondo,
Minister
ministra de
Ana
Igualdad del
Redondo,
Gobierno de España.
Minister of Equality of the Spanish government.
Bienvenida a España.
Welcome.
Ha sido referente,
Spain
además,
has been a point of reference
gracias a la legislación,
thanks
¿no? que se
to
pusieron
the
en
legislation
marcha
that was
en las
passed
legislaturas del presidente Rodríguez Zapatero, en
under
materia de
Rodríguez
igualdad.
Zapatero in terms of
Se ha
equality.
reeditado el Pacto de Estado
The
contra la
State
violencia de
Agreement
género, con
against
gran trabajo
gender
por parte del
violence
Ministerio,
was
un trabajo
vindicated with significant work of dialogue with all political forces and ratified by all political powers except the far right. Consensus in terms of politics, even more so when we refer to the safety of women, are important. Am I not right, Minister? Yes. It is a pleasure to be in this forum, together with people and powerful women and President Zapatero. He is the most feminine amongst the presidents that I know. Feminine and feminist. But the feminine part of him is very important too, and it does allow us to use the same language. It is true that there is no democracy. There is no B democracy. There is no alternative. The only alternative to democracy is authoritarianism. It is violence. It's war. The only alternative to democracy is submission of women. And in a nutshell, it's uncivilization. And democracy as a system is grounded on two pillars: freedom and equality. But freedom without equality is privilege. Merely that, and it will take us back to the Middle Ages. So equality is the true heart of democracy. It is the true beating heart of a system that is the best of those we've been able to build to establish relationships. The system that allows us all to enjoy the opportunities that a dignified life must afford, understanding and seeing the other as an equal in rights, in duties and opportunities. Today we held the Brazil-Spain summit, a really important summit. As President Zapatero just said, this is the time for internationalization, the time to generate powerful alliances that will allow us to look to the future without despair. And in this summit, I would like to remind you that we signed two very important documents, feminist documents, because feminism must be in the agenda. It must be in the public agenda, in the government agenda, and in the international agenda. Feminist matters are cross-cutting. They are not matters of women, they are matters of society. They are matters of all subjects. They are the core matter of any policy. And it is true, as you just said, that progress in equality has always been made with large consensus. The Spanish Constitution, that over these days is celebrating its 46th anniversary, is a large agreement on equality. And we were able to achieve other significant achievements that were able to benefit from large agreements. The law of President Zapatero against gender violence, voted unanimously, that has allowed us over the last 20 years to make significant progress. Nonetheless, to date, we still are being murdered because we are women. 16 women and 3 boys and girls have been murdered this year in 2026 because of male violence, gender violence. And for as long as there is violence, it's difficult to think about other things. If there is violence, we must continue to fight with all of our might, with all of our capabilities. And this is what we tried to do last year by re-editing the state agreement against gender violence. All political forces agreed, with the exception of Vox, the far right. The far right is the problem. They are the problem because they banalize, trivialize gender violence, and they deny feminism. So a political force that is part of the problem will never be part of the solution. But the remaining political forces all agree, despite their differences, we have all together been able to recover consensus, as we did in 2004. And as I said, we signed an agreement to pass 460 measures. What do we aim to do with these measures? Well, we aim to face new violences that are flourishing, because macho violence, imposition, domination, in essence, violence is muting, changing, as the years go by and as the revolutions go by. It muted with the digital revolution, for instance, and now we find ourselves with with true hard violences against women in social media, on the internet, with the different digital formulas that we're taking on in an acritic manner, or at least that's the way we've done it up to now. These digital violences are affecting and impacting the youngest ones. Boys and girls, youth, who see that or understand that relationships with women are not of equity, on an equal footing. They are becoming educated on pornography. Pornography is violent. And with a sexual and effective education that does not suffice, the younger generations are accepting that gender violence in their relationships towards us. And I believe that this violence on social media, digital violence that is suffered by women. Some journalists are here. They suffer digital violence. It's perverse in the same way we suffered them institutionally. Many women in policy do. We must face this new form of violence, a violence that is really dangerous and vast. But we also need to face violence against children because they wanted to damage the mother. This kind of violence is violence exerted against children to damage the mother. We are aware that this violence must be studied, and we must give an answer with specific measures that are already being incorporated into a specific gender violence law. We will probably be the first country to recover that concept and transfer it into the form of a special law. Lastly, economic violence. When we realize the violence suffered by women, we see economic violence lies at the basis of all of these violences, of many of them. Economic violence must be eradicated. President Zapatero mentioned this. The fifth pillar is a pillar where we must provide economic independence to women so that they can develop their lives, their life project, with freedom, dignity, and in conditions of equality. A significant agreement has been reached. Now we need to implement it. Not only will we implement it nationally with national response, we also want to explore through our partners internationally, like Brazil. Tomorrow we will have Mexico, Colombia, Paraguay, other countries. Together we will explore the possibility of a large feminist alliance. We need feminist alliances that will allow us to convey the idea that a better world is possible, a world where justice, where peace, where cooperation and collaboration will benefit us all. And that is why the challenge now is to incorporate them, to join them, men. Many of them already feminist. Many of them are already convinced that feminist is a form of liberation for them, but many are still doubtful. We must conquer their hearts. We must be capable of joining them into our feminist ranks. As Carlota Bustelo said, who we lost last year, who we miss so much, one of the mothers of the Constitution. A lot is said about the fathers of the Constitution, but Carlota was a mother of the Constitution. As Carlota Bustelo said, and I'll finish with this, the feminist revolution is the most transformative revolution of society. With that idea of transformation, we will continue to stand together, also internationally, with so many countries that support us, and that many times they teach us ahead of us. Thank you.
Gracias, ministra.
Thank you very much, Madam Minister. And now I give the floor to Ana Maria Chila, talking about transformative feminism, the political agenda that is transforming. You just now started working in the New York Council, so how do you face? How are you going to work in the city of New York? All these policies about equality between men and women, and taking into account all the diversity that New York is very well known, and as President Zapatero said, you have convinced everyone. Welcome. Thank you very much. Good morning. Good morning. It is an honor to be with you today. I come with a wonderful welcoming words by our Lord Mayor Zoran Mamdani to all of you. In the city of New York, we are going through a beautiful moment. It's a gorgeous moment, but that is full of challenges, of course. Mayor Mamdani was elected last year through a movement of people from all classes, working classes from all origins, people who always felt they were excluded in the most diverse city in the world, but one of the most unequal cities in the world. The city of New York is the city that has the highest concentration of wealth, and the city of New York has 100,000 children who go to school every day without having had breakfast. There are 100,000 children who live in foster centers. We have one of the levels of inequality that are absolutely unbelievable. We have inequalities due to the concentration of power and money in the hands of just a few, and this is the global crisis that we are facing. And if we don't really face this crisis of concentration of power and money in the hands of very few, so we'll never be able to build peace, we'll never be able to have dignified lives for our citizens. So we started our government with a clear mandate to really be extremely realistic and to understand the real experiences of all the workers and all the working classes in our city, but also to have our eyes on a possible future if we create alliances, material alliances, political alliances, and real policies that will allow us to face the global crisis of the concentration of power and money in the hands of a few, and the permanent crisis that we have always lived. We have never stopped having this crisis of gender inequality based on which our society was built. So in the city of New York, we are facing, and in the United States of America, we are facing a very important crisis, this ultra-right movement that the Republican Party is moving towards. So it sees the world through the supremacy of men who are in the heart of the world as a pillar, and the white supremacy as a pillar of their policy. So the election of Mamdani was a very clear movement against this alt-right movement, because within our plan is the idea to build, to live, to carry out a practice of being a feminist government every day. What does this mean? It means that the pillar of our action will be based on equality, based on inclusion, and also on the creation of collective power. When I talk about equality, I am saying that when we think about the situation of women New Yorkers, we cannot only think about women as a one block. We need to think about all the women with all their diversity, all the women that have always been excluded, not only for being a woman, but for being a migrant, not only for being a woman, but because being of color, not only for being a woman, but also because of being poor. So we are constantly thinking on moving towards equality, understanding what is our starting point. And our starting point is really a field where immigrant women, who are the basis of the care economy, the hospitality, restaurants, hotels, etc. in New York, that are at the very bottom of and the basis of the education economy. These are the women who are suffering the most from poverty. And so as an action plan for our government, one of our commitments is to make sure that all women will have access to to help with their children, to make sure that children care will be a right that everyone will access, because there is absolutely no way to have a city, an equal city, if the child care is only suffered by the poorest women with the lowest salaries, or the women who will never receive a salary because they have to take care of their children. So we are committed to move forward in a project that will allow us to establish a childcare universal plan, because the economic freedom is absolutely essential for equality. And we are committed also to fight for the right of housing to everyone, and also with a gender focus. When we see the people who, especially women who live in care centers, or children who live in care centers, because inequality pushed them out of their houses, especially the working class women, because they cannot afford to have their own housing. So we are thinking constantly about how to make sure that immigrant women are included in our plans, our work programs. And I want to go back and talk about my own experience. I was born and I was raised in Colombia, and I arrived to the United States when I was 17. And for many years I was completely disoriented. And as we say in Colombia, it's like, a fly who fell in a glass of milk. But anyway, when I found myself within the immigrants movement, I started thinking that I belonged to the United States and the United States belonged to me. It was through my fight for the rights of immigrants, for my colleagues, immigrants also, that I started understanding that democracy in the United States only works when people really give it life through its struggle and fighting. So in order to change our situation and fight inequality, we have to think not only about public policies that resolve inequality, but also to make sure that there is a participation by the people, so for them to understand that these victories belong to them and they have to protect them. And at the end of the day, democracy is not only going to vote. Of course, you need to go and vote. Democracy is the mechanism that we have in order to care for each other. And this mechanism allows us to build more egalitarian places. It allows us to move together towards peace. The crisis that we are suffering in the United States is a crisis of a failing democracy that allows an authoritarian president and abuser president to abuse not only the people who live in the United States, but also to abuse the world. in its entirety. So we need to convince people that democracy can work, and the way we can convince them is trying through our government and show them also that we are committed to change the material conditions of people in order to allow them to live with more tranquility, more dignity, to make them understand that the city belongs to them, that they are not here transiting through the city, surviving the difficulties of the city, but we need them to feel that this city is theirs and that this city council also belongs to them. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ana Maria. And I just heard now that we are going to have only one round of speeches, but anyway, you know, we don't have enough time for a second round, but it's absolutely amazing to listen what you said, and we could not cut you. So now we're going to finish with Isabel and Madam Zaza, and who is responsible for gender issues in El País. So in El País newspaper, how do you talk about violence and how not to perpetuate, gender violence, and how can you convey a message to combat it and educate for it? Thank you very much for inviting me. It's absolutely amazing to be accompanied with people with whom we have interviews, but we never share spaces, so it's unusual. Today I took the train and I read a survey that was published a few hours ago, and it's all the violence cases since 2017 and 2025, and only last year was the year where we had less violence, patriarchal violence news that we received. So we reached a minimum 0.1.3%. So all the billions of news published in these years, only 1.4% were about violence against women, but that are also affecting all the society. And I was reading also an article in The Guardian where the information about this survey came, because all the journalists, we like to say things exactly the way it is. So Julie Passetti, who is the director of the Centre for Democracy at the University of London, and she said that this result is shocking, because if we take into account the magnitude of the problem and how violence against women were instrumentalized in order to fight against human rights, and also she talks about the press and the negative role that it played, and so I believe that the journalists in the past 2-3 years, sometimes we have more and more difficulties to carry out our work in the best manner possible. And I'm not talking as an individual journalist, because I work for a newspaper that really applies feminism in a cross-cutting subject, but there is a will also in my newspaper to give me the freedom to exercise my job. Not all means they really respect this, so there's very little progress. So we still have a lot to do, but I don't think that this is a failure. This is not a failure, because if I believe that we failed, so none of me or my colleagues would wake up in the morning knowing that there is no positive issue. And I want to give you a concrete example in order for you to understand what the journalists face, because the news that you receive are just nothing compared to the violence that we receive, and the violence that we journalists receive is nothing compared to the violence that we have every day. I'm going to read some of the news that I received in my mobile. One a man in Cordoba was convicted of a crime. Another man also in Pamplona, also another man also just raped his wife, and another man also just killed the police in Peru just detained a man who have abused his daughter. So these are only 5 news, and this is nothing compared to the reality that we have. I have more than 300 news through my mobile feed every week about violence. So for the people who work in this type of journalism, violence is a continuum, and these are absolutely powerful realities and very terrible realities that most women and young women live every day in our country. So every day we publish less. There is something that I'm really worried about. It does not have to do with the quantity, but also with the quality of the news. It's not what we talk about, but how do we talk about things. You know, the alt-right, that feminist movements are totally against, because the feminist movement is extremely aware of how the politics, economy always try to really limit our range of power. So basically, it's very easy to really realize that you are facing a misogynistic person, or this is very easy. But there is another problem that maybe we journalists need to be aware of, is how the language is transformed. The alt-right language is very easy. It's very simple. So no, not all violence is the same. There are different levels of violence, and the most complex one is the violence exerted against women. So what happens when we have new messages that are negationist messages and trying to convince people? I'm going to give you an example that you might think is absurd, but it's not at all. Many of the communicators and influencers, they're talking about a neutral feminism. For example, what does it mean? I'm a fan of neutral feminism. Many people talk about moderation, they talk about neutrality, and this message that tries to be neutral is also reaching the mass media, and it is having an impact, because if I'm aware that journalism in these last years have not been playing a very positive role. We all have a mobile phone, and we all can tweet, or we can publish anything. So journalists, we don't create content, we carry out a very profound exercise and analysis of the statistics and the analyzing the reality. Also, we try somehow, because we have an ethical responsibility with our society, to fight for human rights and to put the news in the clearest way possible in order to understand what's happening. So when I see moderation, I see neutrality, I see that there are many words that are being eliminated. For example, my newspaper receives a lot of claims because there were no details about a physical aggression, an assassination, or a rape. And I want to give you an example. It's a basic one for you to understand why we need to make sure that the language is not corrupted, because our discourse basically that tries to really show reality is being attacked in a very silent way in order to silence women.
Había una sentencia.
There was a decision at a tribunal, and it says,
Imaginad que leéis en una noticia
This news says a man attacked a woman in a surprising way. So you can imagine an aggression. So this sentence that was used and that was published basically is talking about the assassination. A man who told his woman and his two children that they were going out to the prairie, and he threw his wife once they were out and there was and he destroyed the head of his woman with a stone, and he did exactly the same with his 10-year-old child. The second one escaped. And this is how it was presented by the tribunal. So basically, the journalists need to give a real image of reality, not use the words in order to and we have to understand that feminism is a part of democracy and a part of the fight for democracy. And I believe that feminism is the only movement that really is restoring history. And what we women journalists are asking for is to call things by their name. So, Benvinda Janja Lula da Silva, you are a special envoy for COP30 and goodwill ambassador of FAO against hunger, and you are an activist. You are First Lady of Brazil. Welcome in a context that is so complex that all the other speakers talked about related to violence against women. How can we guarantee the security of women and girls in democratic societies, and how in Brazil you are tackling the growth, the impact of the hate speech that we have against women, and all these trends and this violence that we are seeing now. Thank you very much.
Boa tarde a todos e todas que estão aqui hoje. Quero deixar abraço.
Good afternoon to all of you. I would like to really thank all the speakers around me. It's an honor to be here in this progressive, wonderful movement event. It's amazing because when I started talking to the President and the councillors, I said, why there is not one panel that talks about violence against women? And I asked this question, and to have the opportunity to talk about these issues in the progressive arena is something extremely important. There's no democracy without the participation of women. Of course, this participation needs to be effective, and we women have the responsibility to make sure that we are carrying forward public policies and laws that guarantee the participation of women in all fields. We are living dramatic times for women today. Exactly now, in this very moment, someplace in the world, there is a woman that is being assassinated just for being a woman. In Brazil, 4 women die every day only because they are women. And hundreds of women also die throughout the world every day. So it's our responsibility to tackle this. And I thought a lot about this because Brazil moved forward a lot about for the protection of women with different laws. And in Spain also, like President Zapatero said, with the law for equality, we have also the law Maria da Peña in Brazil. We have channels to denounce all this violence. violence, and we were talking about this, Madam Minister, yesterday. So all these mechanisms and protection tools were not efficient facing the extreme right advance, and this has to be said very clearly. Extreme right does not have absolutely any interest in saving women's lives, not women's rights. I'm talking about women's lives. So I was talking about this, that the press is the fourth power in the world, but we have a power that overcomes it, which is the power of the big techs, of the social media, this invisible power over which we have no control whatsoever. And we are living a moment where anyone can really propagate hate speech against any women through their social media without with impunity. And this really had a negative effect on the lives of many women and younger women. So that's why we, in the progressive people, we need to talk every day about this. It's our responsibility to talk about this, like the leaders who will meet tomorrow to talk about this. I am very proud of President Lula, because in this dramatic moment that Brazil is undergoing with so many feminicides, despite all the laws last year, the president, of course, I said it yesterday, he felt my anguish. So every day I was reading the newspapers and saw that 4 women were assassinated just for being women, and we decided that this is not a possible world for us, and we thought that we are progressive. What do we do? And maybe the culmination was the death of Taya, and she was dragged for 1 kilometer by her ex, and she lost her legs and she ended up dying. So this feminicide was the turning point that pushed President Lula to think that the responsibility of talking about violence against women cannot be only carried out by women, because at the end of the day, we only women talk about ourselves and talk about the violence that we suffer. And President Lula, he took personally the responsibility of talking about this. And the same as Spain also created a pact, Brazil also elaborated a pact against feminicides, not the different forms of violence that we undergo throughout our lives every day, but specifically also the political violence that women suffer. And I am one of the people who are most attacked by social media, and I'm prepared psychologically for next year, because we will have elections in our country, and I am prepared to see deep fake images with artificial intelligence about my nude body or whatever, and I am prepared psychologically, because I know that this will happen. We know that Europe moved forward in controlling the social networks, but especially protecting women, young girls. We need to move forward, and there's still a lot to do. So I want to say that Brazil made huge efforts, and I'm extremely proud of President Lula, who is a leader. He's a man who talks about the responsibility of men to eradicate violence against women, because the main responsibles are men, because men are killing women. So to transform this masculinity, we need to talk in schools with young men, with children, in order for them to start thinking about what is the world that we are building, what type of man they want to be in the future. So that's why I'm extremely proud to talk today and tomorrow. In his speech, he will be mentioning this, and I want to say that there is no democracy without the participation of women. This is something that goes together. together. It's absolutely paramount to really take actions, and within our progressive parties, within our organizations, we need to carry out actions in order to move forward. I'm convinced that what's happening today in Brazil is the result of, all the nuisance that extreme right did when it was in power. So we need to fight in order to assure a return of President Lula for another mandate, and we have to fight all together, and I hope that we will all manage to do this. I'm absolutely sure of this, and I am sure that we will be able to win, because the world that we're having today is absolutely impossible. We cannot accept a country where 4 women die every day. We cannot accept that a man kills 2 children just for vengeance against his wife. So this vicarious law that you had in Spain, we have copied it. We are also working on laws against misogyny in our parliament, because many women were marginalized in politics, and there are many women in my party who tell me I can't be in a leadership position. I don't want to be a member of the parliament. So this is absurd, because many times it's a woman who is facing 12, 15 or 30 men. I was talking with a friend who is a candidate today, and I told him, you won't have one single vote, because you're not going to have my vote, because I'm going to vote for a woman, because a woman needs to vote for a woman. I cannot come here and talk about equality, about women's political participation, and when I vote for a friend or a colleague, because you might have a good platform, but we women need also to really uphold other women and help them in order to make sure that we are fighting inequalities. And we have a problem because the Brazilian parliament is not a center parliament, it's extreme right parliament, because, I mean, with civilized people we can talk, but with the extreme right, they absolutely are not civilized at all. We are losing our humanity, and we cannot talk to them. And I think that we need to be united. We need to be, yesterday basically we heard saying that we women are like waters that meet. So this is a moment where different bodies of water, different women are meeting, and the women that we represent. So that's why we progressive women have this responsibility, and also progressive men, they hold this responsibility to be beside us, to uphold our fight. So each time we take a microphone, we need to remind this, because women, we are tired, and many times I say that I am tired, but despite all this, we're not going to stop. We're going to continue united and firm also, and we are going to move forward with the help of men next to us. Thank you.
Bueno, con esto le vamos a hablar el presidente.
President Rodríguez Zapatero would like to say something. Yes, very briefly. We are happy to see that New York is still in the US. And we admire your mayor and his policies. I would also like to ask that people mobilize for journalism that defends equality. It's under threat. Journalism. Obviously policy, but policy can be defended more. They know what they attack. Something must be done. Right, Minister? And lastly, I would like to share an anecdote. She's beautiful, like feminism. Feminism is love. I went to see Lula. I planned to see him in prison. And a week before that, he was released from prison. So I went there. I went to see him at his office. He invited me to a cocido, as we know it here, like a stew. We sat, and the first thing he said to me was, after spending some time in prison for some time, he said, "Zapatero, I'm in love. I'm in love with Sancha." It seemed adorable. The first thing such a dignified and admirable man does, like Lula, when leaving the prison and meeting with another politician, was, "I'm in love." Full stop. What a beautiful way of putting an end to this panel, speaking about love, equality and love. I think everything has already been said. We are all in love with feminism and the progressive movement. Congratulations for the global progressive mobilization. Thank you.